My church has got one temple, wide as the world is wide, set with a million altars, where a million hearts align. My church has no creed to mark, no rolling child on man, but says, come all and worship to everyone who can.
This coming week, we recognize International Women's Day. And indeed, March is Women's History Month. So today's service will focus on women. The music was all written by female composers, and we'll be sharing some readings and quotations from prominent women from the Unitarian Universalist tradition. But I wanted to start things a little differently this week with a reading and a reflection at the top of the service as opposed to later on. And it's going to be a little off the cuff, but I want to read to you from the Bible, a couple of passages. This is from Genesis, and it's a story that you've probably heard, but you may not realize that you've actually heard two versions of this story. So this is the creation from the second chapter. In the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, when no plant of the field was yet in the earth, and no herb of the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no one to till the ground, but a stream would rise from the earth, and water the whole face of the ground. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to till it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You may freely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall die." Then the Lord God said, "It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper as his partner." So out of the ground the Lord God formed every animal of the field and every bird of the air, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all cattle, and to the birds of the air, and to every animal of the field. But for the man there was not found a helper as his partner. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. Then he took one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man he made into a woman, and brought her to the man. Then the man said, "This at last is bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called woman, for out of man this one was taken." That's one account. Here's another one. And this is from the first chapter of Genesis. What I read was from the second. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. Whenever I encounter someone who tells me that they should take the Bible literally, that we should rely on a literal translation, this is one of the first things I jump to, because you have two different versions of the creation, and they contradict one another. In the second account, the one that most of us think of when we think of the creation of human beings, the man is created first, and then woman is created out of his rib. In the first version of the creation story, God creates humankind simultaneously, male and female, in the image of God, and gives man and woman, authority over the creation. And there's also, in the first version, not the story of the apple and the serpent and the fall into sin and so forth. And it occurred to me in preparing this service and thinking about it, how very different would our history, our culture, so much of it rooted in the Judeo-Christian tradition, at least in our part of the world, how different would things be if we focused on that first version of the creation of human story instead of the second one? You may think, Jeff, what difference does it make? But I would argue that it makes a tremendous difference, because in the first version, man and woman are created at the same time and, on equal footing. Whereas in the second creation story, woman is definitely, it is assumed that the woman is subordinate to man because man was created first, and woman was essentially created out of man, the encasing of the man's rib, flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone. And how that story has influenced the status and the perceptions of men and women over the centuries. The second-class status of women, the idea that the woman in the second story of creation was the one that, listened to the serpent and ate from the tree of knowledge and then tempted the man. So it was the woman's fault. And again, the first version, there's none of that. They were created at the same time. And just imagine what society would be like if we followed that first creation story right from the get-go, or if the second version wasn't even there. Would women have been relegated to the status that they were, and arguably in some ways still are? Women are numerically in the majority, but they're what they call a social minority because of their status within the culture. So, something to think about.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces
If you have knowledge, let others light their candles in it. A house is no home unless it contains food and fire for the mind as well as for the body. Margaret Fuller.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. The history of the past is but one long struggle upward to equality. Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
If everyone all in the world had a mindset on freedom, if everyone all in the world breathe a sweet breath of peace, if every woman of every nation, young and old, each generation, held their hands out in the name of love, there would be no more war. If every man in the world had his mind set on freedom, if every brother stood with brother as a witness of peace, if every man of every nation, young and old, each generation, held his hands out in the name of love, there would be no more war. If every leader in the world shared a vision of freedom, if every leader in the world shared a sweet dream of peace, if every leader of every nation worked for justice and liberation, holding hands out in the name of love, there would be no more war.
Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world. Other beliefs are pliable, like the young sapling, ever growing with the upward thrust of life. It matters what you believe. Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged. Other beliefs are expansive and lead the way into wider and deeper sympathies. Sophia Lyon Foz.
Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual words of love.
Stand by this faith. Work for it and sacrifice for it. There is nothing in all the world so important as to be loyal to this faith, which has placed before us the loftiest ideals, which has comforted us in sorrow, strengthened us for noble duty, and made the world beautiful. Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that we are worthy to be entrusted with this great message, that you are strong enough to work for a great true principle without counting the cost. Go on finding ever new applications of these truths and new enjoyments in their contemplation, always trusting in the one God which ever lives and loves. Olympia Brown.